Africa Chamber of Commerce co-hosted webinar on what is driving next generation mining in Africa. As I said, I'm the newly arrived Trade Commissioner for Africa, Scott Morris, and it is my pleasure to be beginning today what is actually my first webinar with the African and Australian mining and METS community. Before I introduce the speakers today, I would like to go through a bit of housekeeping for today's webinar. All microphones will be muted during the webinar, apart from the person speaking. We will be recording the webinar and will provide a link to the recording following the session. After all speakers have finished their presentations, there will be time for questions and answers. To ask a question, please log into www.slido.com, SLIDO.com, and at the hashtag enter the code Africa Mining, all one word. I'm joined today by the following venerable representatives from industry in order of appearance. Justin Lord, Head of Business Development Africa, Telstra. Nick Brullier, Vice President Global Telcos at SES. Connor Murdoch, Director of Growth at Ionics. And Scott Gibson, Key Account Manager for Africa, Russell Mineral Equipment. And closing our webinar today will be Mr. Duncan Harris, President of the Australia-Africa Chamber of Commerce. You will hear later from the experts I've just introduced on what and how technology is transforming mining and the opportunity this presents for Africa and Australia. Having just arrived in South Africa just on 4 weeks ago, I will say up front that I am at the beginning of a steep learning curve. I'm lucky though in that I have some greatly experienced Austrade colleagues in Africa to assist me to get up to speed. Gilly Ramalakana in South Africa, Brenda Wabula in Kenya, and John Atimo in Ghana, who have further introduced me to Australians and Africans that have kindly shared their thoughts and experience with me to help me get up to speed. Having thought about the topic of today, next gen mining, but not having much experience, I thought that the best and the most honest thing I could do was offer my initial thoughts and observations on what surprised and impressed me the most when talking to Africans and Australians about mining here. This is what I found. Firstly, the scale, spread and depth of engagement of Australian mining is impressive by any standard and vast. I've been amazed to learn that there are 145 ASX listed mining companies in Africa, operating 496 mines in various phases of development, from exploration to operation, along with more than 115 Australian METS companies in 34 countries on the African continent. Much of what I have heard to date impressed upon me that Australian miners have very often led the way in exploring innovative new ways to work with and help the growth of local communities, striving for a depth of community engagement and empowerment that takes a long-term partnership approach when building or modernising a mine. Australians are in the truest sense of the word partners, or mates as we would say, that Africans can rely on for the long term. The typical Australian approach is open, transparent, local law abiding, and genuinely interested in the future. This means African nations and local communities will be reaping the benefits of improved infrastructure, highly skilled workforces that could switch their talents to new industries, as well as better paying jobs that will see Africans prosper long after the last minerals are extracted. The second thing that impressed me is how many Australian mining companies have stayed at the forefront of industrial revolution, i.e. the fourth industrial revolution, adapting and using the latest technology to not only stay competitive globally, but remain resilient in the face of adversity. This means that Africa also has access to the same groundbreaking technologies, such as autonomous technologies, smart infrastructure, and digitalisation when they partner with Australia. To prove the benefits of this, the mining sector in Australia has been one of the most resilient sectors of our economy, keeping jobs open and people employed during the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic. By way of personal example, my brother, who over the last 6 years has been working on a range of Australian mining projects in Western Australia, has kept his job and improved his pay and skills during COVID, while many of my other relatives have lost their jobs and been forced to find new work on their own. And one third and final observation, my teammates have told me that Kenya is set to complete its first phase of geological mapping this month. I did not realise that only 4% of Kenya has been mapped so far. I understand that this is a similar story for other African countries. What this says to me is that Africa's true potential and wealth is only just starting to be realised. The African future, though with its challenges, is bright, and Australia is already a great partner of choice for African communities and nations to build this future. May this only continue and grow. With that, I will now pass you on to Justin from Telstra.
Scott. Appreciate it. And Scott, it's great to have you here in South Africa. I know it's been a long time coming. It's also fantastic to be working with Austrade and the AACC again on these webinars. It's a good opportunity for us to share with the Australian business community what we're seeing here on the ground in Africa. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank our fellow speakers for joining us today and sharing their thoughts on digitization in Africa, what's connecting Africa, and what they're seeing here in the ground or on the ground. As my title suggests of this slide, there is a question mark there. And whilst our speakers will be here to share the services that they're delivering in region, the other area that we have is to share what's being done by mining community in Africa. What problems are you seeing? What challenges are you having that we're perhaps not highlighting? And I'm sure we won't highlight many, but please use the Slido and the question or the chat groups. Let us know your thoughts. If there's other topics that you would like us to discuss in future webinars, please let us know. You know, we want to do as many of these as we can or as is practical. So please let us know what different subjects or questions you may have. When we look in the mining industry itself, they're very much used to challenges. You know, challenges for mining industry is nothing new. You know, if we look at the geographical or the volatility, value chain technologies that we're deploying, you know, I think the mining industry is well advanced and done incredibly well. I think one of the areas that we all need to keep an eye on is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity has become a very hot topic. And unfortunately, statistics show us that mining, or specifically more oil and gas industry, has been one of the hardest hit. As we have fragmented workforces that move around and different connectivity methods that we deploy in different regions, it becomes harder. So cybersecurity, if there's one message that we can put out of how the industry is changing, needs to be top of the agenda or stay top of the agenda. I know we've made great inroads with it, but it's certainly one of the areas that we need to keep a close eye on. I appreciate that connectivity has been part of the challenge of that, but our partnership with SES and the different partnerships around the world and how different technologies are becoming available in Africa is fast changing that. SES will give us more insight into that in the next slide session. I apologize for some of the background on this. It's been changed a little bit as we've merged the slide deck, so I've landed up with some other backgrounds. But essentially, this talks to the change that brings opportunity. And I think more what I was wanting to highlight about this slide is, can Africa deliver the technologies that's needed? You know, can we have automation? Can we have the software that gives us the analytics? From what we're seeing on the ground and from what our partners are sharing with us, and the fellow speakers will attest to, is absolutely we can. You know, so it's certainly something we would like to explore more. This slide again is not what it should look like, but it talks to what does a smart mine look like. And I think more from our side is the question, should an African smart mine look any different to any other? And the answer we're getting is no, it shouldn't. Listen, we've had some challenges with specifically connectivity. I work for Telstra and you know, I speak to more the connectivity side of the business whilst we're a tech co. And we know latency has always been an issue around driving some of these technologies, but that's fast changing. And again, we'll hear more about that. Embracing the innovation and the challenges and delivering the data. Typically, this has always been done via terrestrial cable systems. The cable systems around Africa are increasing significantly. We're seeing constant growth. We're seeing the new cable systems coming on board. Those are fine for getting data from the African continent to elsewhere. The terrestrial connectivity has always been an issue. One of the biggest areas that mining industry has always invested in is satellite connectivity. Satellite connectivity has always had the high latency issue and therefore been causing a hindrance on deploying some of these technologies. I'm happy to share with you today that that's certainly changing. Nick, as I said, from SES is going to join us next, and he's going to talk through the satellite capabilities and how that's bringing down that latency significantly. I think some of the areas that Nick's going to highlight in his slides are groundbreaking. And it's certainly good news for the mining industry, because what we can do is use the legacy infrastructure that mining industry is already invested in. All we need to do is change the antennas on it, and we can start to use new technologies. With that, let's find out from Nick what's enabling this new area of mining innovation. Nick, can I hand over to you?
You certainly can, Justin. Thank you very much. And good morning, good evening, everyone. I'm speaking from the UK. It's a bit early here in the morning, but I had a coffee and we're ready to go. So I'm going to spend just the 10 minutes allocated just taking you through some of the innovation that SES is happy to bring to the market, and not just SES, but the space industry as a whole, and the impact that we're seeing that has both on our customers globally outside of mining, but also in mining specifically, and specifically in Africa as well. So SES and the Telstra partnership, it's a partnership that stretches back many years. And it's a reciprocal partnership where both customers and go-to-market partners to each other. We have a number of different types of businesses served, including governments, the cruise market, the aero market. These are markets that you would typically associate with telcos and satellite companies working together. But the innovation that we've seen, in particular automation and digital, it is coming out of the mining sector, and it's something that we here at SES are weighting our resources heavily towards, and that means that what we're going to see is a huge uptick, a continued uptick in the way that the satellite industry continues to drive down cost of delivery. The satellite industry, you'd be excused for thinking it was pretty static, as it has been for a decade or so. But you could not have escaped the press of late, where you've seen the likes of Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos come and invest into this market, and that's brought considerable innovation, different ideas, different thinking, and organisations such as SES who partner with those organisations. We've also been able to benefit from that increase in expenditure that we've seen, an increase in investment, and I'll cover some of those points now. But first, just by way of an introduction, I represent SES Networks. SES is a company. I mean, we serve some billion customers globally, with over 3,000 video streams. So the traditional part of our satellite business was serving video, but when I look at SES Networks and what we're doing, we're really focused on government, mobility, and telcos, and that is a huge growth part of our market and our addressable market. Organizations that we serve, include one end of the scale where we're working with governments on military type applications, all the way through to distance learning, where we're bringing the internet to schools in very remote locations and giving pupils, students, kids the first insights into what's going on the rest of the planet. So it's a hugely vastly different scope of types of services that we cover. It's flicking directly to what's going on in space, and some of the animations have been frozen on this slide, but I'll take you through left to right here. Typically, you would know satellites because of geostationary satellites. They're 36 kilometers above the planet. The latency, it's not been that great, and I'll come on to the innovation that's changing that latency in a moment. But human reaction time is typically a quarter of a second, so 250 milliseconds. So if you're in a remote location and you're trying to game, you're going to be pretty frustrated with 700 milliseconds. Also, if you've got real-time apps, if you're trying to drive an automated piece of plant, that's also going to be somewhat compromised with traditional GEO satellites. So what came next was MEO, and O3b as it was, now O3b mPOWER as it's becoming, pioneered and innovated mid-Earth orbit satellites. These are closer to the planet, as you'll see here, so the latency is a lot lower. So we're below the 250 threshold. We're 150 milliseconds. It gives us a large Earth view, which means that we can cover a lot of area. And the MEO constellations that are currently up there today, we call O3b Classic. We have some 20-odd satellites dropping down significant capacity to places that need it. But the flexibility isn't quite there to what's required for next generation automation and digital agendas. But if I look at what's happening next with the LEO entrants, so I mentioned a couple of them earlier, the Starlinks, etc., the OneWebs of the world, then you'll see that the LEO players are coming into the market at a lot lower. That means that the latency is circa 50 milliseconds, but that's not a round trip. That's not an end-to-end latency, but it's significantly lower than the 150. But you also have some trade-offs there. You don't quite get the capacity. And if I look at Africa and the installations that we currently serve today with O3b Classic, we're seeing sites, pull down mining sites in DRC, Central African Republic, starting to pull down well in excess of 100 meg, 200 meg, and we're seeing the traffic types for those installations change. Whereas before it would be a lot of download and not a lot of return, we're now seeing symmetrical traffic. And what's driving that is cloud adoption and the need to put workloads in the cloud so that you can take advantage of many of the innovations that are happening in that space. And at SES, we're working very closely with Microsoft, and working with Azure allows us to be able to bring technologies like mobile edge compute and 5G, where you really need ultra low latency. And it's those 5G ultra low latent applications that we're seeing also driving this uptick in capacity, that's driving the need for significant capacity mixed with low latency. So we see MEO in the middle here as the optimum band for supporting next generation mining. But we also think that, and we're also seeing this, that the other mediums will also come into play, because no application is the same. So your non-real-time apps will continue to be served by GEO. Some of your worker welfare applications could be served by LEO, but where you need business critical applications to serve automated plant, then MEO is certainly the right medium to serve those applications. I mentioned innovation. I'm very proud to announce that later on this year, working with SpaceX, we will launch our O3b mPOWER constellation. It's a fully digitized software-defined satellite. It's got electronically steered beams. You could say, well, so what? This gives us the flexibility to concentrate bandwidth where it's required, and that capacity could be anywhere from 10 meg to 10 gig, which may raise a few eyebrows in the audience from space, but yes, we can drop 10 gig onto a site if required. But as I mentioned, the typical mining site that we're seeing through Africa is anywhere between 50 meg and 200 meg at the moment, but growing considerably. And when you consider automation, plant automation, what a live video stream requires, you soon add up the bandwidth capacity that's required to serve some of these next generation platforms. Speeds of up to terabit per second. Flexible forward and return. I mentioned the changing needs of cloud. And as we move more and more workloads out to the cloud, you are going to see more symmetrical need. And again, mPOWER caters for that. Justin mentioned security. Obviously, satellite systems are inherently secure. And low latency, we mentioned around 150 milliseconds. So expect to see O3b mPOWER being talked about now. We have O3b Classic today, which is a MEO constellation that we're serving our current mining installations, but there's a significant uptick in capacity coming. O3b mPOWER, and this next slide was animated, but it shows that there are some 5,000 beams available per satellite. Today, the beams per satellite are, it's 10 beams per satellite. So it's a significant increase in capability with this next generation platform. But what I've spoken about, you could argue is pretty complex. Yes, it is, but we take care of all of that. Our whole objective here is not to be seen as a satellite company, but we are becoming, and we are now, a managed data services company. So what we're offering is something that's simple, scalable, and secure. We take care of the complexity to give you simplicity. This diagram covers what we see as a typical installation and something that we're blueprinting with our partners, Telstra. If you look down, and again, the animation's been removed, but what we're trying to show here is that if you look at the mining site on the left, yes, you've been able to deliver you've got an SD-WAN solution from a cloud vendor, perhaps. You've got a mix of bands, so you've got both MEO and GEO. And as I mentioned, there's no reason why you can't add LEO into this mix as well. We fully support that multi-WAN scenario to make sure that the applications are being served by the right medium. But what it means is that in a remote site, all of that complexity, you're removing the need to have so much human IT knowledge on site, because you can automate, you can make it policy-based, and you can run it back to a central location. So really improving the operational efficiencies through cloud adoption of these remote sites, even in places like DRC and Central African Republic, as an example. What I would add as well is that when you look at the innovation that's sitting here on the right, with the likes that can sit your applications that sit in Azure or with Google or with AWS, there's also a number of different applications that you can move out in this software-defined space world, if you like. And things like 5G, as I mentioned, if you need to have ultra-low latency for plant automation on site, then deploying 5G for ultra-low latency and running a mobile edge compute is something that can be done at a push of a button and the right policy. So with that, our job here is to make your life simple, make automated operations a reality. There's a whole set of information, and my ask would be, please reach out. Let's understand more about what you're trying to do in the locations you're trying to do it. And we can share a number of different case studies that we have where we've worked with mining operators, where we've accelerated automation. I've got a slide coming up next that sort of had in the supporting data, but I wasn't going to cover it because you've probably seen lots of slides with these sorts of numbers. But what I wanted to bring out is that the ROI that you see from automation, you're going to be much more familiar than I am. But if I look at the integration that was done with Resolute, if I look at the advancement that was made, it's significant. And although the automation investment at 15 million might seem steep, when you look at the savings, they are considerable. And working with Telstra, working with your suppliers, there's all sorts of commercial financial models that make that affordable. But if my major takeaway here is let's work on your opportunity. Let's understand what automation can bring for you, and let's understand how working together with Telstra and SES, we could accelerate that return for you. So I'm going to stop there. You know, not a lot you can do in 10 minutes. Space is a huge topic, and the satellite industry is moving. I mean, I'll finish on a takeaway for you. You know, there are some 2,500 satellites in service today. That's expected to reach 50,000 satellites in 10 years' time by 2030. That's a significant increase. Morgan Stanley, Morgan Stanley have gone on to say that the investment in space, today it's $350 billion today. By 2040, the space industry is going to be investing $1 trillion. So space is the next big thing that's coming to mining, and I'm really looking forward to the innovation that it's going to bring as we look to automate and bring efficiency and safety to this sector. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Connor at Ionix. Connor, over to you.
Thank you, Nick, and hello everyone. Nick, truly fascinating stuff you were sharing there, and it's a privilege to continue the discussion. Our business, Ionix, we are calling from Brisbane today, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. As a technology organisation, Ionix is a software company, and very simple software in comparison to the detail-orientated nature of satellite technology. As a quick overview, so we're a small business. We are privately owned. Our history, in fact, is in the telecommunications industry. Our leadership was part of the Telstra Partner Channel many years ago in Australia. And when the iPads were released and customers wanted to start utilising mobility and devices for business purposes, we became a software company overnight. Here in Queensland, Australia, we have a very rich mining industry, and so trading with these companies, we innovated with them, and they were on the forefront of innovation. Australia leads the way, particularly in safety excellence in the mining space. So our software isn't focused on the mining operations itself, but more around the people getting to and from mines and keeping them safe, the travel, and also the procurement of items. What we call it is digital people supply chain. In Australia and globally, Africa especially, there's a large proportion of personnel that travel by land. So we've developed some software to assist that. The reason we've gone down that road is we have a history in vehicle telematics, in vehicle monitoring systems, if you like, which actually works off the satellite network. And combined with our telecommunications experience, we developed some very smart mobile apps for our mining customers. So the heavy industries here in Australia, we focus on that in that space. So we have our headquarters here in Brisbane. We have a satellite office in the Philippines, but most of our technical software development is in Brisbane. We also have an office in the UK. So appreciate the time. I'll move through these slides. A quick agenda. I'm going to touch on digital transformation and an infographic related to the spending globally across industries, some trends we are seeing in mining, how COVID-19 has impacted the sector, and we will close on just a product focus, which is one of our solutions called JMS. It's a digital journey management system. We'll touch on what challenges the African mining sector faces in managing the movements of personnel outside of a mine site operation, an overview of the product, and a quick case study with one of our customers in South Africa. So in 2020, globally, $1.3 trillion was spent across various industries. And you can see in 2 years, that is forecasted for 1.97, about a 65% increase. And that trajectory continues onwards. As Justin and Nick has made it very clear, mining organizations are quickly becoming technology companies. Last week in Perth, Australia was a conference called AusMine, and Western Australia's asset president, Brandon Craig, he opens the event, and it was quoted, "The next step in enhancing BHP's productivity will be through automation technology." So the trends we're seeing, obviously there are some extremely advanced and high level trends and strategies being implemented. Nick has touched on autonomous mining, smart mining, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data analytics. What we are seeing as well is very, very simple, fit for purpose, mobile transformation apps in conjunction with telematics and wearables. The result is the connected worker. The entire ecosystem within these mining organizations, the individual employee has a multitude of these technologies at their fingertips. And what we are seeing is employers of choice are looking to bring that together to have a connected worker. In Australia, in the last few years, there's been legislation passed around industrial manslaughter for mining executives, and the responsibility to maintain the safety of personnel is always on a company, even if they're not on the mine site itself. So with the movements of people via land and air, simple tools are being deployed to try and increase the visibility and provide a duty of care to the employees. When these solutions are designed, we go through a human-centered digitalization where we create an interface and experience for the end user to ensure that it is fit for purpose for them. Traditionally, employees within the mining space have often been somewhat resistant to digital transformation. The businesses understand the benefits and the decisions are made, but it's super important to get the buy-in and the involvement of the individuals to ensure that it is something that will be adopted. And the reason being is that through simple mobile interface, the software that we are seeing being adopted all the time is self-serve by the end user. So individual employees are contributing to the process and entering information through their devices, whether company owned or personal devices, to share that information and to contribute to that workflow. So we are seeing solutions that are off the shelf being procured and easily customizable and configurable. A number of use cases that we've undertaken with larger mining companies. However, we certainly work very closely with junior emerging organizations as well as the service providers, is that it's often a lot easier to invest and purchase through a third party versus build it themselves. Just a quick snapshot of some of the solutions that Ionics provides. The Journey Management System, JMS, an online procurement, ops online procurement services, and a a software that we developed when COVID-19 took effect, and it's called SPR, Site Pandemic Response, and that is now a module available in JMS. So I'd like to just put the microscope on journey management. During COVID and in current times, there's more staff on the road than ever before. The drive-in, drive-out workforce really did increase significantly during 2020 when air travel came to a standstill. When it was reactivated, there was strong restrictions on passengers and social distancing. Therefore, more and more people were getting behind the wheel of their own vehicle. Their shifts were longer. Self-isolation and other restrictions were imposed where rosters became more challenging and there were a lot more fatigue involved. In Queensland alone, during 2020, road deaths increased by 11%. And a vast majority of that increase was in fact work-related. People are far more stressed and distracted during the pandemic, and that itself is a large contributing factor to near misses, accidents, and worse. The thing is, from our perspective, the discussions that we have with employers of choice is that technology is adopted and being embraced significantly at the mine operation level, yet there's still very much manual processes and procedures in place for the individuals outside of that immediate environment. Essentially, when people are commuting and traveling via various means of transport, they are still the responsibility of mining companies. They're often on company time. They're often paid for that travel, yet the safety of that individual is often questioned and questionable due to the lack of innovation. But we're seeing a significant shift in that. Market-leading companies are still using paper-based documentation to track and measure journey management. There's a significant inconsistency across their different mine sites and regions, different pieces of paper, different procedures, different messaging platforms, and it's our job to try and piece that together for a consistent procedure. And essentially, there's no visibility of their personnel. One thing we have noticed when you look at location-based technology that sits on a mobile device is that the market is somewhat desensitized these days with that sort of technology because governments have released GPS-enabled applications themselves. People are entering information on a daily basis due to COVID-19. So there's less resistance there and a better understanding that that sort of technology is truly a safety tool. And the knock-on effect is based on not having this technology is that there's a lack of emergency response protocol. A quick overview of JMS. So this is a technology that sits on the cellular network. There are limitations when it comes to working very remotely through Africa, Australia, and the globe. Therefore, we have in-market integration into Iridium satellite devices, either vehicle installed or handheld, which truly gives real-time visibility at all times. So it is a safety software. It is a mobile app that can be deployed privately or through Apple and Android app stores. It's designed to reduce road travel risk and manage fatigue. There is features on this such as verbal coaching throughout the journey, fatigue management stopwatches. It is a comprehensive digital forms builder. So a lot of small, medium, large organizations are just getting rid of paperwork and putting it through a mobile interface. We push training content. Organizations can push their own training content, induction content. It has credentials, management, ensuring everyone is fit for work and has the right certification and paperwork in the field. And the main driver for a lot of organizations is that it covers people traveling in their own vehicles or in hire cars. Traditionally, there is satellite technology installed in company vehicles, but this ensures that both the company fleet and the grey fleet are fully compliant. Cybersecurity is something we take very, very seriously, and we do work with blue chip organizations and have this housed in their own Azure environments or in environments such as AWS. So in closing, a quick case study. Anglo American Platinum in South Africa, we engaged a few years ago. Their challenges was road travel risk, not necessarily driver fatigue and some of the other risks we would see in different markets, but it truly was around the safety of individuals due to instances of civil unrest and furthermore. So they really did need a solution to give a tool to their people to respond to emergency and provide the organisation visibility if they do need to respond. Much like a lot of organisations, I believe there were multiple sites. There's probably 8 or 9 sites in South Africa that this organisation operates in, and they had varied processes between those sites. I touched on no real-time visibility. They also wanted an integration into SAP Concur for expense claim processes, which was completed. And essentially, they wanted to build their own solution in-house, and it was not feasible, and it would take them far too long. So we branded and white labeled their own Anglo American road travel app. Took us 80 days to deliver through scoping, requirements gathering, and multiple languages. We have a global contract, and we're in the process of rolling it out internationally. And 100% of users book their travel and their journeys through this platform, and we support it. So this is a product which is custom off the shelf, and we are seeing a lot of organizations go down this route to provide an efficiency productivity tool to get rid of paper, as well as a safety emergency response tool. I appreciate everyone's time, and I believe Scott from RME is our next speaker. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Connor. That was great. Now I'll proceed on with the presentation, and from Russell Mineral Equipment. Now, a little bit about Russell Mineral Equipment. We're a global leader in design, manufacture, and supply of grinding mill technologies and services. Now, those who don't know much about grinding mills, essentially they're massive mills, a bit like a clothes dryer, if you like, where the ore comes in one end, might be in big chunks of rock that are about 50 mil in or 500 mil in diameter, and they end up have to go down to about 50 microns. So they have to be ground up, and these big mills can be up to 40 feet diameter, and they're massive pieces of equipment. Now, inside these grinding mills are liners, and they're sacrificial liners, and so they do two things. They allow the mill to be or the ore to be lifted and broken and smashed up, and also protects the inside of the mill. Now, these liners do wear out, and over time they have to be changed maybe once or twice, 3 times a year. And whenever a mill is down, the old saying is, if the mills aren't turning, the mills aren't earning. So these mills, it can be typically $500,000 an hour when they're out of service. So we need to do this very, very efficiently and very, very quickly. So the quicker we do it, and so that's what RME does, is provides mill relining technologies and services to be able to visibly and defensively sustain and improve concentrator performance. Now, we're doing this all around the world, and essentially we're an Australian company. I'm speaking to you today from Toowoomba, which is just up the road from where Connor is, in Brisbane. We're in Toowoomba in southeast Queensland. But we have offices in Africa and South America, North America, APAC and Europe, and we've got 9 service centres. So we've been in the business for about 35 years, and the number of machines we've sold is quite significant. And we're in about 64 countries and 380, nearly 400 mine sites around the world. So you can see this, if we look at the central, we're just talking about Africa today. So in Africa, our first machine went to Africa in 1993. So we've been there nearly 30 years. And this was up in Ghana. But if you look at the geography of where we are in Africa, we've got a service centre in Johannesburg and one in Accra in Ghana. And we're recently putting someone in Zambia as well. But in Southern Africa, we've got 54 mine sites we're working on, 32 in South Africa being the largest one. Essentially, the mine sites that we're looking at in Africa are predominantly gold and copper. So the gold sites are mostly, and platinum, sorry. In South Africa, they're predominantly gold. West Africa, they're gold. DRC, Zambia, Zimbabwe, there's platinum and copper, and so on. So yeah, it's been a big journey. It's been a great journey. So essentially in Africa, we've got 86 machines, 86 mine sites where we've got our equipment. And as I said earlier, nearly 400 mine sites around the world. Now a little bit about the technologies we're working on. Essentially, mill relining is a very manual process. In the past, they used to use sledgehammers to knock the bolts out that hold the liners on the inside of the mill, and then they're lifted out with by hand. Very, very dangerous, very time-consuming, and very ineffective, if you like, work. So what we've moved on is larger liners, larger machines, larger mills, to essentially grind more rock quickly and safer, and everyone's happy in the end. So what we're doing now to improve these technologies is, first of all, I'll talk about the RMEI visibility camera system. When the operator is sitting on one of these machines inside a mill, operating the machine, there are other operators inside the mill making sure the liners go into the right position. Now there are blind spots in there. So what we've done to try to overcome any safety issues is put these RMEI visibility cameras in place. So that takes out the blind spot. The second one, moving on to that one, is proximity. Just moving across the top, the proximity is they're pretty much a device that detects any human or any receptor that's nearby. So as you can see the picture there, you've got a little red dot on the top of that guy's hard hat helmet, and the machine would, if it comes nearby within a meter, it slows down, and if it comes within 20 centimeters, it just stops, so it doesn't knock the man out. So that's Russell proximity. Safety, mill reline director safety is it's a really powerful discrete event analysis capture system that we've developed by analyzing thousands of mills around the world and thousands of procedures around the world involved in mill relining, and putting those into best management practice, if you like, and assessing someone's reline over a reline time, which might be 5 to 6 days, 10 days on a really long one, and look at where we can save time, where we have safety issues, or where the mine has safety issues, and also what efficiencies can be gained by improving the overall process. So that's the mill reline MRD safety. The other one is automation. Automation is essentially the Rolls-Royce of mill relining, where we don't have any operators in the mill. the operator actually sits outside in combination with the RME view, which is down the bottom. So they've eventually got a headset, and between RME view and automation, the operator can actually be outside, or it can be sitting somewhere else. Could be sitting in Johannesburg, it could be sitting on the Gold Coast and operating that machine. It's a little bit of a long stretch, but that's where the technology, the communication technology really comes in. And the last one I'll talk about is Skyway. Skyway is these Thunderbolt hammers are always on the outside of the mill, and they knock in the liner bolts, the bolts that hold the liners themselves. Now these are typically suspended. They weigh 300 or 400 kilos. They have to be suspended by something. Could be a jib, or it could be an overhead crane, or it could be a monorail system. But with Thunderbolt Skyway actually is a gantry system that is rigged up around the mills, follows the curvature of the mill, and automatically will go to the next. It's mapped out. Each bolt is mapped out, and so they proceed to the next bolt, knock the bolt in, and move on to the next one. So it's very, very fast, very, very quick, and very, very safe. So all in all, we're moving towards methods that we can improve the concentrator performance, but also the safety and the efficiency of these grinding mills. The other one we look at, and this is where the communication technology comes in. Because of travel problems, we haven't been able to get our technicians to site. This is one sector. But so what we've been able to do is by other technology, we've been able to remotely service some of our machines. And so we've got technicians. They might be in Toowoomba, they might be in Johannesburg, or they might be in Santiago or Salt Lake City or somewhere like that. And they can be actually assisting the guys on site with a service. The other one we use for designing these machines is because each machine is bespoke. There's no mill relining machine the same, because all the mills are different. All the geometry around mills are different. Every mill relining machine has got to be designed from scratch. You can't just go and buy a mill relining machine off the shelf. So they have to be designed. And prior to that, we would send an engineer on a brownfield site, send an engineer to site, measure it up, assess all the critical dimensions. Could be the mill diameter, mill length, the clear entry diameter, the mill axis height, liner details, all that sort of thing. And they would come back. And typically a measure up would take a week. So if we had to send an engineer from Toowoomba, travels over, spends 2 or 3 days on site, then comes back. What we've been able to do now through technology, and we've done 2 or 3 of these so far this year in Africa because I haven't been able to travel, is a virtual engineering site visit where a technician can go to site with an engineer back here in Toowoomba and physically go through. They can just physically go through each dimension, each measurement, and map it out on as they go. So it's been a tremendous saving for A, the customer, and B, for RME, and it's been highly effective. So mill relining is moving forward in leaps and bounds. It's not the grunt work that used to be even 5 years ago or 20 years ago. We've just moved on to bigger and better things. So if I move on to the next slide, we've got in Africa, we've got 2 offices. Nico Venter is our business development manager. He's based in Johannesburg, and we've got an office in Accra. I used to travel to Africa a lot. I've probably been there 20, 30 times, I guess, over the years, but I haven't been there for a number of years. But I look forward to getting back for next trip. And thank you very much for your attention. And with that, I shall pass back on to Scott. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. That was great. And I'd like to thank all of our speakers today, Justin, Nick, Connor, and Scott just now, for some great insights into the transformation of mining across the globe, and more relevantly to Africa. We haven't got much time before I need to hand over to Duncan to close out, so I might be very succinct with the questions that I ask. But starting with with one that came in a little while ago, can I please ask Nick, how much has COVID driven technology to reduce the need for travel in Africa?
I guess I could answer that with what have we seen as an increase in remote traffic during the COVID time. And as you can imagine, people's working practices have changed significantly. We've seen a significant uptick in shift in traffic patterns, as you would expect, from people moving from work locations to home locations. And I can't put a number on it, but certainly I would estimate that's a 20 to 30% shift in traffic patterns that we've seen on our network. Have we seen operations drop off? No, far from it. Operations are still working. What we are experiencing, and I mentioned in my presentation, we're seeing a dramatic increase in capacity requirements. That means getting new equipment to site to cope with those new capacity requirements. That's been a challenge. Borders, getting engineers to site in remote locations to activate new sites, getting equipment to those sites through customs, through air travel. Air travel, as you know, is shifted from passengers to cargo, and getting equipment into Nigeria, as an example, at the moment is extremely difficult, as just one example. So that's been some of the effect. I think the question is, what's the effect of COVID been? Those are some of the things that we've seen related to mining. But yeah, look, certainly, and if you look at working practices, I mentioned software defined versus static. A lot of our systems and our processes are software defined or digital, and that means that we can react quickly to changing market needs. And really pleased that we took that investment a couple of years ago to change our working practices there. So we've been able to adapt to those changing needs.
Thanks very much, Nick. Look, we're really running out of time, but I'll just ask one more question that was asked a little while ago. Actually, there was a series of three referring to the cost of infrastructure, or the different cost profiles that mining operations have. The comment was, South Africa has more advanced infrastructure. What about operating in West or Central Africa? And large multinationals can typically afford and access these tools and transformational technologies. What if you're a junior miner with only a small footprint in Africa? How can we access this? I might throw this to Connor, if I could ask you to comment, Connor, or Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Look, I'll certainly take the second question, because our technology is extremely modestly priced. It is very much suited to junior explorers and organizations that are, bootstrapped and looking to provide a simple solution. Essentially, it's a user subscription arrangement, working off the cellular network. And if I'm to jump into the first question around coverage, understandably, South Africa's coverage of the Telstra and a cellular network, which Justin could probably comment on, is probably more advanced than the African regions. But if uptime and visibility of that individual is required at every juncture, second by second, that's where we integrate into a Iridium handheld device, which works all around the world. So there's limitations on coverage. However, people can leave coverage areas for hours on end and resume in coverage, which is their home or a small town has cellular coverage. JMS, our product, works fine, and it is very much an affordable product that I welcome a chat offline with anyone to discuss the details.
Thanks, Scott. I might
Thanks,
just jump in on the back of that if I could. Thanks, Connor. I think that's a great question, and it leads into so many different avenues of it. But, something comes to mind that I heard Mark Kudfani mention from Anglo a couple of years ago, that mining organizations have the power to change a lot of the way services are delivered and procured, and that mining has had enough of spending capital, and that they want services delivered as a service. And I think, in answer to your question as to how can smaller junior mines and startups procure these services, it's through the cloud offering. You pay for it as a service. There's no capital expenditure, and the mining industry, as Mark simply said, is big enough to drive that change. From a technology point of view, we understand it's far advanced in South Africa. We're seeing a lot of cloud providers coming to Africa at the moment. We're seeing a lot of subsea capacity. So, typically uplifting data from remote regions in Africa back down to South Africa is absolutely doable. The cloud providers are there, and then the cable capacity going to different other countries. I do, however, appreciate the challenges that Africa represent, and we like to think that we're steadily working on those and growing it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justin. And now we're a bit over time, so I'll hand over to Duncan to close us out today. Duncan.
Thank you, Scott. On behalf of all taking part in the webinar, may I congratulate each of our speakers for their great presentations. The application of supply chain expertise through the METS is clearly undergoing and bringing about major technology changes. As such, it can and does deliver massive value creation to the mining industry, as illustrated with the ROI we heard about at Resolute Mining in Mali. I'm sure that in particular, our presenters would welcome your direct follow-up with them. There is so much for you to think about here. We at the Australia Africa Chamber of Commerce are delighted to partner with Austrade, along with Telstra, in bringing you this webinar. And I would, on your behalf, like to thank Scott and his team at Austrade for their organisation of this event. We look forward to bringing you more of such events to help you make those all-important business contacts and connections. But finally, what I would like to say is, Mark Kudfani, who's the CEO of Anglo American, says, if you're not in Africa, you're not in mining. Thank you very much.